Introduction to Philosophy, Metaphysics and Epistemology, Reality and Knowledge. Chapter 3, Theaetetus. Our text gets back on track in Chapter 3 with Plato's dialogue, the Theaetetus. Our text offers us a selection of this work that picks up in the middle of the dialogue with the guiding question, what is knowledge? Our selection begins with Theaetetus expressing his difficulty with Socrates' questions, and Socrates beseeches Theaetetus to try again, and compares himself to a midwife to explain Theaetetus' discomfort. He explains to Theaetetus that the discomfort he experiences is analogous to the labor pains of pregnancy, because he has something inside him that is trying to come out. Just as the midwife assists the pregnant woman to deliver the child, Socrates will assist Theaetetus in delivering an answer to the question, what is knowledge? Theaetetus' first attempt at answering this question is to say, knowledge is perception. Socrates connects this answer to the doctrine attributed to Protagoras, namely, that man is the measure of all things. There are at least two ways we could interpret this doctrine, if not more. One would be relativism, that things are to you as they appear to you, and things are to me as they appear to me, and that's what knowledge is, that's what truth is. However, since the same thing will be true or false from person to person, this basically destroys knowledge. Things like mistakes, falsehoods, and the like are no longer coherent concepts. A second interpretation could be that what all people agree is true is knowledge. However, it is unlikely that all people will agree on most things, which puts an unacceptable limit on the possibility of knowledge. Furthermore, recall from Lecture 1, this is also an argumentum ad populum fallacy. Socrates and his interlocutors continue to analyze the hypothesis that perception is knowledge, and notice the following difficulties. If perception is equal to knowledge, then once a perception is over, then the knowledge should be gone also, but it doesn't seem to be. There is also the difficulty of illusions, dreams, and madness, which give us an oxymoronic conception of false knowledge. Remembered perceptions are also entertained, but remembered perceptions would not be knowledge if knowledge is in fact equal to perception. Another issue that arises from the argument that perception and knowledge are equivalent is the consequence that knowledge would always be in flux because we are always in flux and we're the perceivers, and the perceived world is in flux as well. What appears to be the final argument against perception as knowledge is that perceptions are different, and the fact that we can distinguish between them is part of knowledge, but the ability to distinguish is not part of perception. For example, we perceive color and sound and recognize that they are different. Likeness and unlikeness are universals, unlike the objects of sense to which they're applied. To apply them requires cognitive abilities that go beyond mere perception. Therefore, since we know things that perception cannot provide us on its own, we know that knowledge is different from perception. This selection from Plato's Theaetetus is not an easy read. It includes a lot of mental acrobatics and some dizzying discussions of dreams, illness, color, motion, and the state of nature in flux, and strange intermediate conclusions that seem to render everyone irrefutable. Returning to the first interpretation of Protagoras' doctrine, man is the measure of all things, since this means that truth and knowledge are relative, it will not matter if two people believe opposites. Both are right and wrong at the same time, which is contradictory. As Socrates points out, this makes philosophical discussion an act of folly, and also arguably renders political discussion very difficult, if not impossible. Because if we believe this to be true, we have no grounds to say that anyone else is wrong about anything. Though our selection from the Theaetetus does not extend to the end of the dialogue, there is eventually a conception of knowledge discussed that became very influential in epistemology. It begins with the proposal that knowledge is true belief, but runs into trouble when they consider instances of accidental true belief, which don't seem to constitute knowledge. Eventually, they discuss true belief with an account, a conception that influenced the idea of knowledge as justified true belief, which was a working definition for knowledge in epistemology for centuries to follow. We'll return to this idea of knowledge as justified true belief in future lectures.